Distribution provided by Cloud Sigma, the cloud that adapts to you. Visit cloudsigma.com/thisweekin for a free $200 credit.
This Week in Startups is brought to you by SnapTerms, online legal protection made simple. Visit snapterms.com and enter the code TWiST to receive a free NDA with every order. And by MailChimp. Manage lists with up to 2,000 subscribers and send up to 12,000 emails per month for free with MailChimp.
Hey everybody, it's Jason. I'm here in Boston and I'm meeting with a lot of great companies and doing a couple of This Week in Startup episodes while I'm here. And I'd be remiss if I didn't meet with the founder and CTO of HubSpot. Dharmesh Shah is with us, and we're going to have a great hour-long discussion about how he built HubSpot, angel investing, the Boston scene, all of these great things. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah. Money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, this is a great interview, and hey, look, our partner for today's program is MailChimp. As you guys know, I've been using MailChimp for all of the Launch Festival, for This Week in Startups, and even for Inside.com, my new startup. 2,000 subscribers and 12,000 emails a month free. And you pay as you go, mobile-friendly email templates, and version 8 is out with multi-user access. This is something I've been waiting for, and boy, is it really well done. And actually, Aaron, their designer, who wrote a lot of great books on design, is going to be here at the Launch Festival. And we're here cleaning up the whole mess from the Launch Festival right now while I'm reading this ad. They do a great job at MailChimp, 2,000 subscribers and 12,000 emails per month for free. And they're constantly releasing all these new features, which is great. And I got to tell you, this ability to have multi-user access, you may want one person to send emails and another person to handle unsubscribes and subscribes. You may not want the person who's handling the customer support stuff to be able to actually send to the list, right? Kind of dangerous. And now you get that little multi-level user support where you could say, this person can do this person can't do that, and you start figuring out who in your organization you want to have access to these features. Not because they're going to do something bad, but some people do steal mailing lists and stuff like that. You got to be careful. You want to just make sure nobody makes any mistakes. That's most of all. And the software now with version 8 has multi-user access, and that's going to be great for us, I got to tell you. So the free plan is always free, and you have the ability to manage up to 2,000 subscribers and 12,000 emails per month. You're seeing this all over the place. Facebook is sort of losing favor with young people in certain demographics, and then Instagram becomes popular, and before that it was MySpace, and next it's Snapchat. If you're investing your marketing dollars in social networks, I gotta tell you, you're dope. You're a dope. That's the way I feel about it. Everybody spends $1 to get a like or $2 to get a follow. Forget all that. Get the goddamn email address. You have that email address, it's for life. What email did you sign up with Twitter with? What email did you sign up with Facebook with? What email did you sign up with for MySpace or Snapchat? It's the same goddamn email. It's probably your Gmail or your Yahoo mail or maybe your AOL mail if you're my mom. Who sent me an AOL mail this morning. Really, Mom? Get on Gmail, please. Waiting for that day she gets hacked so I can put her on Gmail. The point is, the world runs on email. And if you're not collecting emails of all of your constituents, your customers, your fans, you are a dope. I don't mean to make this a very negative commercial, but I mean, how many times do I got to tell you people? Get these goddamn email addresses. They're worth like $25 each, $100 each, depending on what business you're in. Collect email addresses and use MailChimp for it. And I love MailChimp, and I just want to say thank you at MailChimp for supporting essentially everything my team does for entrepreneurs. MailChimp is the first one to step up and say, hey, we'll support the Launch Festival, we'll support This Week in Startups, whatever you need, Jason, whatever your team needs, and I really do appreciate that from the heart on behalf of all the startups that you've helped us support. And most of all, this is a tool that startups can use for free. You're going to get to, 2,000 emails on your database, maybe in 6 months or 3 months or 9 months, and they're not going to charge you, and you need to save every penny in the early days. And when they do start charging you, it's because you're getting tremendous value from it. So thanks again, MailChimp. And let's get back to the program. It's a great episode, if I do say so myself. Hey everybody, it's Jason. As you know, I made a trip to Boston to go to one of the board meetings for the company Dyn, D-Y-N, that I'm on the board of. And I thought I would swing by on my way to New Hampshire, Boston, and do a couple of This Week in Startups so you can meet some of the great founders and companies here in Boston. And one of them that's been a rocket ship is, of course, HubSpot. Everybody's been talking about that, buzzing about it, software as a service. And I didn't understand the business. And I think that's probably a pretty good sign, Dharmesh, that it's a good business when people don't understand it, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess so. But although we're in the marketing business, so you would think that we'd be better at telling the story.
But in the beginning,
yeah.
it was a little bit confusing as to what you're doing. So explain to the audience, what is HubSpot? When did you start it? And what was the mission?
Sure. So HubSpot's about 6.5 years old.
Yeah.
And the idea behind HubSpot was to create a marketing platform. And the idea was we were looking at, so we were both grad school students. My co-founder and I met at MIT. And the observation was that this thing called the internet was happening, and the old school marketing methods weren't working, like advertising and direct mail and all those things. We're like, oh, well, there's this thing called the internet. Everybody should be benefiting from it. And why aren't more businesses, particularly small businesses, doing it? Like, it's so obvious. Why aren't more people doing it? And we're like, okay, well, let's see what it would take to actually do this for like a mere mortal, for a small business. And it's like, oh, well, you use something like MailChimp, you get Google Analytics, you wire it up to Wufoo for your forms, and you kind of pull all this stuff together. All great products, right? And great businesses. But the reality is most small businesses don't even know all those various kind of players in each of that category, and they can't pull it all together. So the idea behind HubSpot was to kind of be this integrated platform that allowed mere mortals, small businesses, to kind of do in what we call inbound marketing, to be able to pull customers in instead of doing outbound marketing, advertising, and that kind of stuff.
And at that time, 6 years ago, boy, software as a service, that was a new category as well. So I'm guessing when you started this, people were talking about, hey, maybe there were desktop applications to do this kind of thing. I mean, before MailChimp, you would have a downloadable mail client on your desktop, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think one of the things that makes the market exciting, both HubSpot and all the SaaS businesses, is that now we can get to a body of customers that was just impossible to really reach. That's one of the reasons why we haven't seen a lot of software success in the small business category. Like Intuit's the only really, up until relatively recent times, the only really big software, like multi-billion-dollar software company in the small business category. And the reason was it was just too hard to reach customers, too hard to deploy, too hard to support, and the economics just didn't work. And SaaS now kind of makes that possible. So it's
people needed QuickBooks, or in the small businesses and home office, they need Intuit, they need QuickBooks, they need these kind of things. And so they absolutely had to spend the $300 or $400 for those solutions. Absolutely. But for marketing, it was like, marketing for small businesses was sort of the yellow pages just 10 years ago.
It was, and that was, so when we started, one of the things we were kind of thinking about in terms of just market opportunity, so, and we've raised, a ton of capital at this point, we can talk a little bit more about that, but the opportunity that we saw was that if you look at the P&L of any business, any normal sized business, every line item on the P&L, there's a multi-billion-dollar revenue household company, software company attached to that line item. There's SAP, there's Siebel back in the CRM days, except marketing. Like the largest marketing software company we've ever seen was probably like Omniture, $1.5 billion. Big,
right?
But not like $10 billion, not SAP, not Siebel, not that kind of thing.
Yeah, and Omniture was really analytics.
It was really analytics, exactly.
And Google really came in and changed that market, with their free product
they
offering.
They did. And so the question we asked ourselves was like, okay, well, and this is the thing VCs ask all the time. It's like, okay, what's different now? Why this business and why now? And the answer to the why now was 10 years ago, like the marketing discipline wasn't one that software could really help a lot with. Like if you were a 5-person marketing team, you had a budget for marketing, you created some creative, you outsourced a bunch of stuff, and you bought inventory to kind of get that message out, essentially. Right. But now with the internet, we have all this data about our marketing, all this information about, so now it looks like an industry that software was kind of designed to help or should be able to help. So our thesis at the time was, a $10 billion company does not exist in marketing software because it didn't need to exist before. It was a very kind of artsy, craftsy kind of discipline, and now it's a data-driven discipline. So someone will create a massive SAP Siebel-style software company in the marketing category.
That's a fascinating observation, because it is true that when you're buying, let's say, newspaper ads or classifieds, or even doing local television spots, if your small business was that big, there was no click-through rate. There was no, maybe people picked up an 800 number or something like that. But when you shifted online, whether it's Craigslist or a local newspaper's classified ads or AdWords or Facebook ads now, my gosh, that is all quantifiable.
Totally, yeah.
So that's an interesting premise. Look for a world where things weren't previously quantifiable and then build software. I wonder if there's another example of that quantified self.
Yeah, like a lot of the healthcare business, things we just didn't know before because the records were either distributed and fragmented, but now they're starting to come together into things that people can
That's
analyze.
interesting.
Yeah.
Google Health was launched, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and they shut it down.
Yep.
And I guess the premise was that we would have digital records, and now we actually have it. If Google Health existed today, and it pulled in your Fitbit and your Nike Plus and all of those things,
Yep.
it actually could be quite valuable.
Could be, yeah.
Interesting premise, and that is a really interesting test. As you know, is there a market there? And so, you were at MIT getting what graduate degree?
So it was an MS degree. It was out of the business schools. It was a little strange, but so it was
They have a business school with Harvard's business school. Is it like a sharing thing?
No,
or?
it's its own. It's a top 5 business school here, just as part of MIT and unaffiliated with Harvard, which we call the other business school. But no, it's okay. So it was an MS in the management of technology, which is a weird kind of engineering mixed with like an MBA
or
kind of thing.
MBA.
So
Not
it's
IT.
an MBA, like it's essentially an MBA with some technical geeky stuff thrown in.
It's a great combination. But when you started the company, social media didn't exist as a tool to a large extent. I mean, you had MySpace, but it wasn't looked at as a business tool.
Nope.
Boy, did that change. Was that the accelerant that made this business grow so fast?
Part of it, I think it helped. The thing that really helped was just blogging helped. Because what it did, essentially what blogging demonstrated was that if you had something useful to say, if you created content, you were actually able to pull people in and get access to prospects and leads and eventually customers just by saying something useful. And it was a much more efficient way to kind of do that. And blogging, as the tools kind of and the technology evolved, people didn't think of this as this kind of weird radical kind of thing. Like millions of businesses were starting to do it. So that helped. And then social media essentially took it to a new level because in a way it was just a easier way to do kind of content publishing and get messages out there. So social media has helped immensely. It's like that's one.
And blogging is fascinating because it's interesting. My brother-in-law runs a company called Causecast, and they're a client of yours, but you wouldn't know. I guess a self-serve client.
Yep.
And I was always telling him, he was always asking about blogging and how exactly your premise, like pulling people into their company, and one day I start getting a Google Plus from him, a tweet from him, even an SMS message and an email, all about these different blog posts he's doing that were kind of interesting. Yep. And I was like, wow, I guess you guys started publishing. So I got this thing, HubSpot. It sucks in all of your contacts, all of your lists, and then it shows you your SEO of your blog post, suggests keywords, suggests what you should blog about, and then you blog about it, and then it shows you what leads you're getting. So really the product has taken it that far at this point?
It has. So it's, and that's probably the kind of canonical use case, which is, you put a website up there. Let's say you're a 10-person law firm. This is a great, generally a great example. So normally you'd put a website up there, and maybe if you were really sophisticated, you found some form tool that lets you put a contact us, and so you can kind of get feedback.
Yeah.
So we kind of carry it all the way through, which is, we have a content management system. We've got the blogging app. Built-in forms for getting leads, essentially. You can ask custom questions. Those leads go into your CRM system. Let's say you're using Salesforce.com. Then you can set up automatic email campaigns to say, I want to send everybody that fits this particular profile this email. So nurturing campaigns, and then track all the analytics that says, here's how many leads you got through your blog based on author, and just tracks it all the way through to revenue. Right? So you can say,
cow.
So we can tell you that through SEO, we saved, like the equivalent PPC spend would have been $250,000, something like that. It's like, here's what the actual economic value of the various online channels are for you. And it's very hard to pull that off. Like, big businesses do it all the time, but for a 10-person law firm, that's unheard of to be able to know that I wrote this blog article, and here's not just how many leads and customers I got, here's who they are. I know which customers read which blogs all the way through. So it's,
and does that allow a small business to have a little more confidence in investing in marketing.
Totally, yep.
Just closing that ROI loop.
Yep.
And so people, if this law firm was using HubSpot, they write the blog post, and if they've already got a mailing list, it informs the 1,000 clients they have, okay, here's a new article on the changing laws around trademark, let's say. But then once you've signed up for more information on that post, it knows you're interested in trademark. So whatever, 3 days after you sign up, it sends you, hey, here's a trademark primer. And
Yep.
7 days later, it sends you another one that this is.
Exactly. And so,
Wow.
and the other great example, and we can talk. I get a little bit passionate about this, but
I love the examples. Yeah.
So if you think about, let's say you're a B2B, let's say you're Dine, who's
Right.
also a customer, and what ends up happening is that you have like an inside sales team, like people that are selling, and what happens within Facebook, within HubSpot now is that people are coming to your website. They may come back 3 weeks later because it's a considered purchase. They're not going to buy. It's not an e-commerce transaction, right? It's a relatively, it could be a larger buy. And so the inside sales team now has access to that individual person's profile. Like here's when they first visited our website. This was 2 months ago. They were searching on this particular keyword. Then they came back 3 weeks later, read this blog article, then left this comment on this other blog article, downloaded this white paper, and it gives them like a Facebook timeline style view
Holy
of the
cow.
entire history of that individual person, which kind of arms the salesperson to say, okay, I know the background. I know what brought them here. I know everything, all the interactions they've had with my business. I know because and this is the value of having everything in one place. That's literally
Right.
impossible to pull off if everything's disconnected. If you have analytics over here and your forms are over here and your blog somewhere else, and it's just hard.
Yeah. What are the other amazing examples of a win? And I guess if you're taking it that far, dumping the contacts then into Salesforce, which obviously a big company over 50 people might have, but a small company is not going to have that. So in HubSpot, can you also do the actual CRM in the system?
Yeah, we have essentially a lightweight CRM, like a contact system, which a lot of our small business customers just use as their CRM because they're just moving up from spreadsheets essentially, and it's good enough. And we have a mobile client, and it's been reasonably popular.
What are the other examples of just hitting it out of the park uses that people came up with? Because the street does find its own use for technology. I'm sure things you didn't intend for it to be used for, it was used for with great efficacy.
Yeah, one interesting example, this is in the nonprofit, although it applies to for-profit organizations as well, was the ability, let's say you have a nonprofit and they have a 20,000 person email list that they've kind of accumulated over the years. They can pull that, and they do, pull that email list into HubSpot, and we have a social media tool inside of HubSpot. So the first thing we'll do is we'll do lookups and say, how many of these people that you have in your mailing list are on Twitter, let's say. Of those, how many people have more than 5,000 followers? So then you can actually do an automated email campaign that says, okay, well, these people, if they have more than 5,000 followers on Twitter, chances are they're writing, they're influencers, they're saying something to someone somewhere. You don't accidentally wind up with 5,000 Twitter followers. Just, that's rare. So instead of sending them the kind of classic, oh, please donate money, please volunteer, why not have a specific ask that says, I'm going to send those people, those 800 people, say, like, can you please retweet this? Or we have this blog article that we think is life-changing that really kind of defines, could you just please share this with your audience, essentially?
Right.
And that's something that just wouldn't be possible before because you wouldn't know who they are across your 20,000 list. So.
Fascinating. And when you look out at the different channels for acquiring customers, obviously content is a wonderful one because it's so targeted.
Yeah.
But what is, and I would say that you would agree that's the number one?
It's the number one, yeah.
What's number two? Is it buying, Google traffic, Facebook, Twitter? What's the number two small business marketing technique today?
I think it's PPC. It's
pay-per-click.
Yeah.
And is Google still the reigning dominant king there?
By far, yeah, they are.
And why is that?
They have the inventory. So if you, most people still use Google. The market share in the search engines has not changed meaningfully in, like ever actually, in a long, long time. So it's that's where customers are going, and Google's, done a great job. The original model kind of worked, and it's trackable, and small businesses kind of get it. You get immediate feedback, so that's why small businesses do it. But
so then people make the content and then just buy some traffic through HubSpot.
Yep.
It's automatically done.
Yeah. So we don't support PPC within HubSpot, which is
oh, really?
We don't support paid marketing actually because we're maniacally passionate about, and this might change over time, but around inbound marketing, which is for all the money that's being spent on things like PPC and billboards and trade journal ads and those kinds of things, we think businesses are much better off just investing in content and pulling their customers in versus kind of blasting their message out.
We've seen Facebook try to court small business with pages over the last couple of years with mixed success. they obviously asked people to put the like button up. Then they asked people to pay for followers. And now they're asking people to pay a third time, which is to reach the followers that they've already paid to acquire. What's your take on a small business's approach to Facebook, which seems to keep changing the rules of the game?
Yeah, so it's and Facebook is a partner, and I'm a fan of the company use the product, but from a small business marketing perspective, I think there's still a fair amount of work to be done for reasons that you already have outlined, which is it's changing. You really don't know when you're investing. So let's say you go off and say, oh, I'm going to go off and invest, acquire 10,000, 50,000 fans. And then they kind of change the rules on you as time goes, as they kind of see fit. So it's really hard to make that investment, because in terms of just accruing fans or whatever, like you do all the ROI calculations, then you have to kind of throw it all out, because now you're only going to get to 15% of your audience without having to kind of pay to reach them again. And so the thing that I think gives me hope longer term is it can't be just about kind of fan accumulation. It has to be about intent. So I think the search within Facebook now, the new
they're sort of delving into search, it seems like, because I think the initial premise of their pay-per-click network was going to be demographics and the social graph, but it doesn't seem like that is as powerful as somebody putting what they're interested in right now into a search box.
I think the intersection, though, is what's really interesting. I think why Facebook has a really decent chance is they have the social graph data set, right? But if you intersect that with intent, which is, okay, so, and I think the most common thing, so people use Facebook search today for searching for people. It's a social network, right? So it's like, I want to find my college buddy from India. The next evolutionary step in my mind would be people-based services. So if you're looking for an interior decorator for your condo, and you might go to Google and you might find people that are particularly good at content creation. They've done all the kind of right things, and their website is great. But someone that's like a friend of a friend that they used or whatever, it might be a better result set as a result of that. So if you can combine the intent, which someone's searching for this, with the here's what we know about them, here's who we know who they like, we know who they're interacting with. They have a weighted graph. It's not just who follows who, but like, are you actually responding to that person in that particular context? I think they have massive opportunity, actually.
Yeah, it seems like just knowing, these are, I don't know, females between this age or males between this age, not super powerful. But like you're saying, if you're in the market for, an electrician or a plumber or a designer, oh my goodness, knowing which ones your friends interact with on a regular basis, or which ones have the most interactivity on their, or engagement, it's a pretty good signal.
Totally, yeah. So it's a different function to calculate trust. So Google uses inbound links and authority from, like, oh, you got a link from the New York Times.
PageRank.
You have PageRank. What Facebook has essentially is a different style of a trust calculation. It's like, okay, is this individual or this individual, even a business page, trustworthy or not? It's just a different data set, which I think could be better for certain classes of searches.
And people pay on a subscription basis for HubSpot.
They do.
What do the prices range from? I know it's really cheap to get into, but...
Starts at $200 a month
right.
and goes up to about $3,000 or so up from there. But
And the majority of the clients towards the $200 or towards the $300? How does it break down?
The average is probably around $500-600, so somewhere in that range.
Wow. So that's not an insignificant spend for a small business, but it's an insignificant spend for a medium-sized business.
Yeah, so our sweet spot customer is a company with between 20 and, let's say, 200 employees, somewhere in that range. So it's in the definitely SMB, and we have some really big customers in there as well. But
yeah, and so reoccurring revenue and pay-as-you-go, people can cancel anytime. You're not locking them into multi-year contracts?
No multi-year contracts. We do have annual contracts now, and it's the standard. This is actually a good startup topic. So one of the things when we started the company, and it was all month to month, every single customer. And the reason we did it is we were very, calculating. This is probably as good a word as anyway. So we're like, okay, well, and so our board was asking us, well, could you get annual contracts? Could you get the cash up front? And we're like, yeah, we think we can, but the data that we get from someone didn't cancel is worth much more to us than the cash value of someone just paying us up front. Because if they paid us for a year and they signed the contract, if they really thought the product sucked, we wouldn't know that for another 12 months. And that information, knowing that the product sucks and customers don't like it, was much more important than the actual cash, even though we could have gotten it.
I see. So the cancellation it almost forced you to not suck.
Exactly. And both my co-founder and I came from enterprise software, where kind of drive-by sales is kind of like, you kind of get the hardcore sales, like it's the kind of old kind of Oracle model. And part of what we wanted to do is kind of build a culture around, like, you have to earn your customer's business every time. It just breeds
Earn
good
it every
behavior.
month, or they
month
just
after month.
cancel.
Exactly. They can vote with their dollars and just walk, essentially.
But then you move to yearly eventually when
Yes,
the product
we have
was
some
great?
customers the product's getting better. So the data obviously is worth less to us. We have lots of data now that we know exactly the churn rates by cohort, by type of customer, by day of week they signed up, every possible way. So we have customers on annual contracts. We have customers that are monthly. Yeah.
Oh, and they choose what they want?
They choose, yeah.
Yeah, and so some people are just like, I want the discount.
Exactly.
Give me the full year.
Yep.
And how many people now at the company?
Let's see, about 450, a little over 450.
Wow. Yeah. So to grow that large, how have you maintained the culture here? How have you scaled the company? You're a first-time entrepreneur?
It's my third company.
Third company,
Yeah.
okay.
Biggest one of the three that I've done. Culture it's interesting. The first 3 years of HubSpot, like, the word culture was never like spoken in the halls of HubSpot. Like, we just never talked about it, never thought about it. It just kind of happened. And then about 3 years, and we kind of got religion. We did our first kind of employee survey. Just like, oh, the company's doing pretty well. We love the team that we have around us. Like, are people happy? So we just decided to do a survey. And so we did a Net Promoter Score survey, which asks exactly 2 questions. Question number 1 is, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to refer HubSpot as a place to work to your friends and family? It's the classic, there's an entire methodology behind Net Promoter Score. And the second question is, why did you respond that? It's like qualitative.
Yeah.
And so the thing we learned was people were exceptionally happy at HubSpot.
Right.
And the most common reason given was the other people at HubSpot. That's what made them happy. It was kind of self. And so we're like, you know what? Like, business is going pretty well. Whether we designed it or not, we have a culture here. And then then we started.
So is that
getting
helpful though? I mean,
Yeah.
okay, I like being here because I respect my coworkers. Well, if you're at the company,
Yep.
if you didn't respect the coworkers, you would leave. So is it an indication that you just hired really smart people who are similar to each other, or is it an indication that a culture is there? How did you parse that? Hey everybody, what a great episode this has turned out to be, and I want to just pause for the cause. I want to thank the sponsors and the partners of the program, and this is an easy sponsor for me to thank because, like all the products and services you're going to hear me talk about, we only accept advertising and partnership from people when we use and respect their products. SnapTerms is one of those great products. We've used it here at This Weekend. Go to thisweekend.com/legal, and you'll see our very funny and clever and intelligently written terms of service. And these terms of services and privacy policies are very expensive to do. If you're at a startup company, just ask your lawyer, hey, I got to do a privacy policy. How much is that going to cost ballpark? And they're not going to tell you the price. Which, when you don't get the price, that means you're going to get screwed. But with SnapTerms, they tell you the price right up front, and it's going to be $149 or $249 or $300 or something like that. They have a whole series of different solutions for you, and you just pick from the menu. Simple, affordable, fast, and easy. Protect yourself. And you know what? There's all of these goddamn lawyers chasing startups, trying to do good products in the world and trying to catch them when they forget to put their terms of service up, because you think, oh, I'm a lean startup, I'm going to put a service up. And I don't need to put a term of service up. And then what happens? You get caught and you get sued, and then there's 8 attorney generals, and these guys are chasing you, ambulance chasers. It's the disaster. Go to snapterms.com, enter the coupon code TWiST. That stands for This Week in Startups. TWiST. And you'll get a free NDA, non-disclosure agreement, with every order. And by the way, if you have a complex business, you do an e-commerce and social, and you think your business is so unique that nobody's at crowdfunding and so unique and nobody's ever done it before, they have a custom solution for you. It might cost a little bit more, but it's going to be, I tell you, 1/10 of the price of using a law firm, because I've done both. And if you took the law firm version of your terms of service and your privacy policy and you compare it to SnapTerms, you're not going to see it different. This is cookie cutter stuff. They've just made a better system for putting it together and protecting you. Go to snapterms.com, use the promo code TWiST. Thank you, SnapTerms. Go ahead and thank @SnapTerms on their Twitter account. I'm telling you, even if 1 or 2 or 3 of you do that every episode, it really informs the sponsors that we have loyal fans, and I know you guys are loyal, and I know you guys love the fact that we are now getting close to 350 episodes of This Week in Startups. Thank you to my super fans. Thank you to my new fans. And thank you to @SnapTerms. Let's get back to the program.
It's funny. So the next step, once we kind of came to this realization, and I love my coworkers, wasn't particularly helpful. It's like there's not a whole lot other than like we'll keep doing what we're doing. So the next step was we want to analyze what we call like the people patterns. Like, what is it about these people that makes them successful at HubSpot? Like, what are and we're very much into this geeked out data analysis kind of thing. So we did and so we came up with these are the attributes of people that tend to correlate with long-term happiness and success at HubSpot. So that was our first kind of pass at defining culture.
So you've been here for 2 years, and you said you're a 10, you're a 9 or 10 in terms of referring people to work here.
Yep.
So and what did those people say? Well, who were those people actually? Not what did they say, but who were they?
It was interesting. So the patterns that we kind of discovered is that there were, and this is what we think of. Lots of people talk about it as core values. We think of them as just raw patterns. It's like the data shows that these kinds of people tend to be happier than these kinds of people. One was transparency. They just love the fact that the company was transparent. So we have this relatively rare thing at HubSpot. So we have a wiki at HubSpot, which we've had from year one. And on that wiki, we post just about everything. Cash balance, board decks, notes from the board deck. Anything. The only thing that's not shared are things that we don't believe it's our data to share. An example would be salary information, because we think it's partly owned by the company, partly owned by the employee.
Sure.
And then where we're legally bound or it would do harm to some other, let's say we're thinking about acquiring a company, we wouldn't put that on the wiki because we're not at liberty to kind of, but everything else is shared.
So people can see the bank balance.
Totally.
And they can see how profitable the company is.
Burn rate, what was the burn rate before, how are sales doing, and this is all 450 employees in the company have access.
And so these folks loved transparency, and so a person of any level of intelligence would deduce from transparency-loving people are what? They're intelligent people? They're detective-like people, they're empowered people, or they're
open people. So I don't, it's not as much of a value judgment. There are people that just like to kind of share and are open. And this is one of the things, so once we discovered this, we made, the kind of all the core attributes or the patterns that we found, we made them part of the recruitment process. So we would ask them, it's and we would give them examples here's what we would you be comfortable sharing this, or and do you think of yourself as a transparent person?
Right.
It's there's not, there's no good or bad. You either are or you are not. We just found that people that are tend to do better here because the company is just very, very transparent.
Right. And so when you make this decision, your board or your management team, somebody must have said, hey, wait a second. It's going to freak people out if they see we're burning $500,000 a month. That's something that founders or VCs might be very comfortable with because they've done it, but that's going to scare the hell out of people if they think we only have 9 months of runway in the bank or 12 months or whatever it is.
Yep.
Do we really want to do that?
And it's interesting. You're right. It's uncomfortable.
People did say that, right?
So
how did you get past it?
They did say that, and the way we got past it is we did it very early, and we just kept doing it. So it was just what we think of as kind of gravity. This is how our little ecosystem is kind of built up. It's working so far, and so it continues to this day, even at 450 employees.
Wow. And the other response must have been, well, people are just not going to be able to handle the profitability they see in our business. They're going to come in here and say, well, I want a raise, and why can't I have a raise if we did so well last month? And what was the response to all that?
It's interesting. And there are definitely people that might react that way, but and this is going to sound overly trite, but in our minds, the people that would think that way we made a bad hire. That's a cultural non-fit, essentially. It's if you're really worried about that, if you're going to use that information against us or whatever.
Yeah, if you're petty or cutthroat in that way, you're not a team player.
You know what? It's, part of the reason we have this, there's 2 reasons for the transparency. One is people value it, they like it.
Right.
But we also think it breeds better behavior. So we think, there's an old phrase that's, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Right.
Really stupid things happen in the dark behind closed doors.
Right.
But if everything's kind of out in the open, and so we've had, wiki posts where, my co-founder, we would get blasted by the employees. We think that was the stupidest idea ever, and we'll have 100 comments on an internal wiki post.
Wow.
Because it's just out there. It's people value that. I think it's one of the things that's made HubSpot, be the modest success it is so far. Yeah.
Well, modest success, 450 people. You've raised a ton of money, perhaps one of the biggest web and enterprise companies now in Boston. How much have you guys raised?
A little over 100 million now.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's easy to raise that money for a predictable, reoccurring revenue product. It's easier to deploy money for a product that's so predictable, I think. Yeah?
Yes. That's totally true. So and this is my first venture-backed startup.
Wow.
And when we started, I'm okay, when we raised our Series A, we raised $5 million. like the thought was in my head at the time was, okay, this is a software business. I have no idea how I'm going to spend $5 million.
Right.
It's like it was like unfathomable to me. It's like, oh, $5 million. Like there was only like 3 of us in the company.
Right. I got to hire 20 developers.
Exactly. How is this going to? Even then, it's like it's hard to spend that kind of money. But what we learned, so we did some research. Like, okay, then we raised another $12 million within a year after that. And so like, okay, look, why are we raising so much capital? So we did some research and we looked at all the publicly traded SaaS companies that had ever gone public, and we looked at the kind of median raise that they had. How much money had they raised before going public? Because these are the successful outcomes. And the weird thing was, it was like $42 million, the median. And the reason is that in the SaaS business, since you have this kind of subscription model, you're essentially financing your customers. So you might make $20,000, $30,000 from a customer, but it's going to come over 3 to 4 years.
Right.
All your acquisition costs are front loaded, like all the sales costs, all the marketing costs. And so the weird, ironic thing about SaaS is that the more successful you are, the faster you're growing, the more cash you consume. It's a great business, very, very predictable, but it's exactly the kind of thing that should be capitalized, right? It's like, oh, we know that we can spend $1 in the sales and marketing machine, and we're going to get $3+ out, right? It's like I would make that bet every day of the week as long as that math continues to work, and it continues to work. So,
but it is a little scary for somebody who's coming from a non-venture background to all of a sudden say, okay, it cost us $500 to acquire a customer.
Yeah.
Let's acquire 10,000 of them.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's what you went and did.
Yes, that's we're about 8,500 customers now. It's but it's just been a very predictable growth curve. It's
And so, is there a cap to this business, and is that what keeps you up now? Is now that you've established, hey, there's a business here. Hey, people love the product. What comes after that for an entrepreneur? Of course, the first thing is, can we even make this product, and does anybody want it? And then will people pay for it? You've answered all of those questions. What then becomes the question for a company like this?
Yeah, in my mind, the thing that keeps me up is not like competitive forces, not are we going to hit some ceiling, because the marketing industry is huge. We have 8,500 customers. There are millions of businesses that should be doing, whether they buy HubSpot or something else, should be doing
Is
this,
it really millions? Yeah.
It's millions.
Wow.
It's millions.
So you predict you haven't hit 1%?
Not even close. We haven't even scratched the surface. So the thing that keeps me up is that if we end up crashing and burning, it won't be murder. It'll be essentially a form of suicide. It'll be self-imploding. It's like the culture didn't work. Something broke. It wasn't someone else does something to us.
You will have effed it up.
Yes, we will have effed it up.
You will have effed it up somehow. So it's almost like your game to lose. You've got the lead, and so you're routing against the mistakes. How do you even do that as a manager, as a management team? How do you keep yourself from making some huge blunder?
And that's we don't know. So the thing is, so it's entirely possible that we've already planted the seeds of our own destruction and don't know it yet, right? It's possible.
Being an entrepreneur is fun, huh?
It is.
The psychology of entrepreneurship.
Exactly. And you have a psych degree, so you should know.
Exactly.
That's exactly it. But no, so the thing we stay up nights, and I personally stay up nights thinking about is around kind of the culture issues. Like, okay, what kinds of things, and there's a few things we kind of got lucky on the culture, things that like the transparency, it's worked out really well. It helps us continue to scale, but we were looking for more of those things. So, and I'm working on what I think of as like culture 2.0 at HubSpot now. It's like, the first pass at it, was supremely useful. It's been a couple of years since we've done that. So I'm spending like over 80% of my time over the last couple of months just thinking about that. Like, how do we scale the culture? How do we minimize the chances that we F it up, essentially, and continue to grow? Yeah.
So the concern is, how do I keep this place a great place to work? How do I keep it from devolving into a boring place or a political place or all those places that none of us want to ever work?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
How do you manage your own psychology? We've seen a lot of discussion around the pressure of being an entrepreneur, questions about Jody Sherman's suicide, Aaron Schwartz's suicide. Obviously, it was not because of founder pressure, it was for another reason. But Ilya, the Diaspora co-founder, we're seeing this dialogue start about pressure. You felt the pressure, I'm sure, in the 6 years. How do you manage that massive pressure there is as a founder?
It's interesting. I've this is my third startup, so I've had probably the darkest days were in my first one. It's like I didn't know what I was doing at all, which I know a little bit more now. But
well, you must know a lot more now.
Yeah, so we're not. Yeah. So the classic kind of roller coaster things. We haven't had those kinds of issues. So it's not, we haven't had to worry about like hitting payroll or something like that, which is kind of classic entrepreneurial stuff. The thing that like I worry about is, and it's sometimes a matter of like how you define success. For us, it's like living up to the potential of the team that's here, and that's what really kind of keeps me up. It's like, yeah, we could like, up until this point, like most startups, like especially in my early days, like this is a pretty successful startup. We can kind of write like, oh, we did okay, but.
Well, how about let's go back to those earlier days. I mean, what was the darkest moment, and how did you get through it? Darkest
moments are always when you hire your first employee. Is like the scariest moments, right? It's like, oh, now like someone other than me and my co-founder are like depending on the company now. But the darkest ones are always around just cash flow issues, right? It's like, okay, well, like you're living literally like week to week. You're just 48 hours from like missing payroll, and so I've had. So that's one period of and I've had that multiple times in the first one, and then you kind of go to the employee like, here's what's going on, and we've had people take pay cuts voluntarily. We've paused salaries, and they stay. I mean, it's
and that's hard stuff.
It is hard stuff
to go to an employee that you've recruited and say, we may not be able to pay you next week.
Yep,
that's got to be the most brutal moment for an entrepreneur.
I think so. It's like way up there. The other one is, and this one actually is less brutal because when they're like so bought into the company and they're just so there, and it's like, okay, well things are going, and I can't, and you have to kind of balance this, being truthful and without like scaring the bejesus, like, and becoming this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of like people just get scared.
We're going to hit the wall.
Exactly.
And then everybody's looking at the wall, and then you drive into the wall.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's just debatable. Like, okay, well, I've always tended towards more on the transparency side, just telling me like, here's what's going on.
Right.
But that's hard.
But you don't want to panic everybody and show weakness either as a leader.
Totally. And then the other ones, it's the classic, cliche, stereotypical, but like letting people go is always hard. But to me, that's less hard though. And the reason is, at least in the tech sector, we're very fortunate in the economy. Even as the economy goes up and down, like no one would find like have a hard time go getting it. Like so it's like the demand far exceeds the supply of the talent demand.
So it's not like you're feeling a level of profound guilt as a founder firing somebody who's not a culture fit, let's say,
exactly,
or just not performing because they're not going to be able to feed their family.
Exactly. They're not going to miss meals. They're going to be fine.
But even if you know that, it's still a little bit hard.
It's always hard.
Yeah,
it's always hard.
Yeah. And earlier in your career, you took it a lot heavier, though. I get the sense.
I did. It's a lot of it, like insecurity is probably one of the worst kind of dysfunctions, right? It's like lots of like bad things happen through insecurity. And it's one of the things I think about in terms of culture is how do you, if you can like manage to take insecurity out of a team, amazing things happen, right?
Wow.
If you can take insecurity out of yourself, amazing things start to happen.
I've never thought about that, but that is expand on that.
Yeah. So if like when people are worried or they're just not feeling secure, they tend to take less risk. They're making worse decisions, even they may not be knowingly doing it. And that's the thing that makes like first-time entrepreneurs' lives so hard. It's because if you're self-aware at all, you're insecure for a reason. You're insecure because you don't know what the heck you're doing. Essentially, it's like,
you're a neophyte.
Like, we've got 50 people in the company, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But then you power through it. It's like you grow and
Yeah, and if people feel more secure, they can be more creative.
Definitely.
Take more risk.
Yeah. And that's
all of those wonderful things start to happen.
Becoming the issue, I think, and every company feels it. HubSpot will feel it as well. So one of the things I'm thinking about on culture is I think as you grow, and this has been well documented, it's like you just have this risk aversion, right? Like successful companies, like, oh, this is what's working. And you have the stakes get higher, right? Mistakes are more expensive, at least in theory, and you actually have to actively push people to take risks. You can't just say, oh, like we accept risk and we're okay with failure or whatever. We're going to start like rewarding failure. Like it's one of the things that's in my new Culture 2.0 thing that I'm talking about with the company. But
rewarding failure. So we want to try a couple of stretch goals, a couple of stretch ideas. Who has the best ideas? And now you have to go do it.
Yes.
And the riskier, in a way, the better.
Yeah. And so the other thing we're doing is, as far as a culture hack, and we'll write this as a blog post, we want to share it, but which I think is pretty good. Like lots of companies track the things that they tried. And here's the things that we tried and didn't work, right? Which is great. It's like, we document it. But the things that you essentially failed to try, you deliberately said, someone in their head said, we're not going to do that.
Right.
That never gets documented. We're going to start tracking those things. And the reason is if it's, once again, it goes to transparency.
What you decide? Oh no,
No, you didn't even try.
you didn't even try.
That's the worst thing, right? It's like
Wow.
it's a negative data set that should be tracked. Because it's like, okay, you know what?
See if somebody else made it work.
That, and are we misguidedly avoiding certain kinds of classes of things we don't even try, essentially.
Right.
And the best kind of corollary, which I love, so Bessemer Ventures, one of the VCs, has what is the anti-portfolio. So they kind of publish, here are the companies that we had the opportunity to invest in that we didn't.
The anti-portfolio.
The anti-portfolio, right?
And how did that perform versus the ones they selected?
Exactly. And so then if patterns emerge, like, you know what? Like in our anti-portfolio, let's just say it was, we never funded a woman entrepreneur, let's say, or something like that. Like, you know what? Like that kind of stuff starts to surface when you're doing things just wrong. The data starts to show it. Otherwise, we're losing this entire body of data when we only track the things that we actually tried, even whether they succeed or fail.
Speaking of gender and expanding it to race, you're Indian?
I am.
So you're not a white male who went to a Ivy League school? You're an Indian male who went to an Ivy League school.
Eventually went to an Ivy League school. Indeed,
What are your thoughts on race in our industry? And you've been in our industry for a while.
Yep.
You've got a couple decades under your belt.
Yep.
Do we have a bias in our industry against minorities or for minorities? Or what's your take on it? It's a big topic of discussion.
Yeah, it is. So my personal take on it, so when
Yeah.
I first came over, and my first company I started in Birmingham, Alabama. I was there for a while, right? It's like
Alabama.
the heart of the South, right?
Yeah.
And so if there were...
There's a place with complete racial equality.
Exactly, right? So
No.
if one were to like plot the distribution curve, if I was to experience racism, that's probably one of the places I would experience it.
Right.
Essentially.
Yeah.
And I was there for 8-10 years. And this is, very early in my life. I didn't feel it. Not that it didn't exist. Not that other people didn't experience it. My personal experience was, at least in the tech ecosystem, in my
the tech
personal experience,
ecosystem, you didn't have it.
I didn't hit it.
And you're not saying that it's impossible that it existed, but just you didn't experience it.
And so, my general take on it is like tech industry tends to be just much more meritocracy based. It's like, okay, it's like we want to grow company. Like I don't know. I could be completely off, but
Well, I mean, you're running a 450-person company, so when you hire people, you're generally not coming to the table saying, what is your ethnicity or gender or any of these kind of things.
Yeah.
You're very much looking at what impact they could have on the company's performance.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it'd be silly for, and this particularly in small business and startups. It's just a transparent environment. You get to think about every hire as you're growing or whatever. So it's I think just from raw economics perspective, it's just bad business.
Right. It does seem like bad business. Do you think there's a bias towards immigrants? I've heard VCs say, and you're an angel investor, yeah?
I am. Yep.
So do you think on some level when you meet somebody who has immigrant parents or who is an immigrant who's had to work hard and suffer through stuff that you say, that person's had to struggle more, therefore they're more likely to have a good outcome? Do you have a bias towards the people who've struggled?
I may have a bias. I don't think I do, but if I do, I'm trying to think through.
I kind of feel like
As an angel investor, you look for scrappiness to some degree.
Yeah, I do look for scrappiness.
Yeah.
And
The other thing I probably, maybe I do have a mild bias. One of the things I look for is that, because some of the entrepreneurs in my mind that end up being really successful are the ones that have a point to prove, to some degree have a little small chip on their shoulders, they're out to kind of it's just...
I'll show somebody.
Yeah, exactly. It's they're...
It's interesting because some people would say, the industry was biased towards people from Harvard and MIT and Stanford, et cetera, and a Harvard MBA. I recently had somebody who had a Harvard MBA tell me they don't put it on their bio anymore,
right?
Because they feel like they're less credible as a Harvard MBA in terms of entrepreneurship. And certainly in the Fairchild and Intel days, whatever, the 60s and 70s, it'd be lauded, and that would be what you'd be, and even into the 80s. But it seems like somewhere around the 90s, the Ivy League schools became maybe not as important.
That's interesting. Yeah, a inside story on HubSpot. So one of the funny things people say is that the valuation of of a tech startup is $1 million for every engineer, and then subtract $250,000 for every MBA that's on the team.
I actually haven't heard that last part of the equation.
It's nice.
It's so genius.
But my co-founder and I, and all 8 of the first 8 people on the management team all had MBAs.
Right.
It was doomed to failure doomed to failure from the beginning.
Right.
But
you're down $2 million.
yeah, exactly.
You're $2 million. You have $2 million in debt.
But,
Take $2 million of your valuation.
But it's worked out. It's worked out well for us. It's and we have a predisposition to MIT. Most of the early team came from there. But we like the kind of geeked out, you think about and analyze problems part of it. So if you can intersect that, and across MBAs, across just about everything, there's a distribution curve. So the people that are really, really good are really, really good, but the average doesn't change all that much. Like the average MIT grad is. Yeah.
What's your angel investing thesis, if you have one?
And
what have you invested in?
Yes, I've done, I think, about 38, 39 deals so far. And when I started...
Over what period is that? 3 years, 4 years?
No, about over five and a half.
Okay.
I started when I was a student at MIT, a grad student, and that's where I've made my first few investments. But my motivation for doing this is completely self-serving. So I had sold my last startup, right? And I went back to grad school to kind of figure out what I wanted to do next. And my wife and I have been together for a long, long time. And I told her I wasn't going to do their startup. I was going to do something different, essentially, because I've worked the startup hours for a long time. And it's like, okay, I know. I will live through the pain of other entrepreneurs vicariously,
right,
by making angel investments. I'll get all the kind of fun and excitement, but then I get to go home and just
sleep at night.
Sleep. I can pontificate and won't this be awesome, right? This is
fantastic.
That was exactly it. And so I just started writing checks, essentially, that's what I'll do. And it didn't work out that well in terms of HubSpot started, while I was in my first year at MIT.
You couldn't help yourself.
I could not help myself. You
just love the action too much.
Genetic flaw. Yeah.
So when you look back on your portfolio, what the successes were? Was there a pattern? And does that pattern inform you today?
Yeah, there is a pattern. So I have a few constraints. When I started angel investing, one of my constraints, especially as HubSpot was growing, is I wasn't going to be able to spend time. That was my biggest constraint. It wasn't money, it was time. And as an entrepreneur, I think just focus is so important, right? And so HubSpot's growing really, really fast. And I'm like, I can't do the angel investing thing and be the co-founder and the really, really fast. It's not fair to my team, not fair to my investors, so on and so forth. And so the only way this is sustainable is if I don't commit the time, essentially. Right. So I don't do due diligence. Over half the entrepreneurs I've ever invested in, I've never met or talked to on the phone, which is weird.
What?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, right?
Wow.
Crazy. And so I'm not saying and by no means should people follow that pattern, but for me, it was either that particular model or not invest at all.
Right.
That was the choice, essentially.
So you had limited resources, you had to put the money to work, and you didn't even talk to them on the phone. You just did email, or they came referred through somebody great?
Both. So the On Startups blog, was getting some popularity then. So I would get just folks through that network, people that I knew online, like Rob May,
right?
Who you're
CEO
of Backupify, exactly.
Yeah. Great startup. Was out of Alabama, moved to Boston.
Yeah, Kentucky, but moved to Boston.
Kentucky rather. I'm sorry.
And he had a blog at the time. I had a blog, and we just knew each other online, and we just oh, I'm thinking about this idea, and so I just wrote the check. You should go do that. Sounds like a good idea.
So you wrote it before he started.
Yeah.
And I was, I think, the angel after he started.
Exactly.
So you were the first. I guess maybe I was the second. Because I saw a review of Backupify.
Yep.
And I immediately said, wow, back up your Flickr account in case Flickr loses your photos.
Totally.
That is genius.
It's brilliant, right?
It's so brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a cloud backup of a cloud backup.
It's cloud to cloud backup.
Cloud to cloud backup.
Yeah.
And I emailed webmaster Rob at Rob.may at Backupify, just saying, and I said, I love this idea. Have you considered, taking investments to stay at the company? Email me, and sure enough, we invested. And now this is a tremendous business.
Huge success story. This has been awesome. Yeah.
And in that case, you just met him through your blogs, which dovetail pretty nicely with HubSpot's mission.
It does, yeah.
How efficient are your leads from your blog?
Yep.
And the blog is your blog is
On startups.com.
onstartups.com, which also has a Q&A forum, which is
does.
powered by Stack Overflow.
It is, yeah.
That was back when they, I guess, offered their software as a service. Do they do
did.
that anymore or not anymore?
They don't do it anymore. They have this.
So they had to grandfather you.
They did, yeah. And I'm an investor in Stack Overflow as well. So
Oh, well, that's gone well too, Joel.
that has gone well, yeah.
Yeah, and who else have you invested in?
Let's see.
That's done well. Broken Out.
Bunch of them. So Shareaholic here locally is actually.
Oh yeah, Shareaholic, of course.
I'm an early investor in that one. Just like other folks.
The little thing you put on your blog post to share to all different places.
Yep. Buffer, which is I think doing really well early.
Buffer
early
app.
breakout. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. They pitched me, and I was like, "This is really nice, but it's just really simple." And then now I'm addicted to it. So there was a perfect example of me missing because I couldn't conceive of the product that they eventually built.
I almost skipped it as well, and the reason I didn't, they're just great entrepreneurs, and it's like, and I still haven't met them. I still have not met them to this day.
But they're great entrepreneurs because they iterate relentlessly.
They iterate relentlessly. They get marketing, and it's
they do.
funny. This is one of the things I feel like I have. I won't call it an unfair advantage, but I have a roughly good filter for two things. One is, like, do you actually understand marketing? I can look at someone's website, look at their blog or whatever. It's like, okay. You know, so and I have a bias, but because of HubSpot, but On Startups, begat HubSpot. So like, the reason HubSpot exists is because the On Startups blog started, and I was kind of seeing the fact that this model works. But you have to be good at, like, if you're a tech entrepreneur, you're a software entrepreneur, you should be writing content like the day you start writing code. Like you should start building up that audience. You need to be able to get to people, or whatever. It's going to be really, really hard to succeed if you don't have some sort of reach. It's just so painful to kind of get going. So.
Yeah. And what's the scene like here in Boston? I mean, we read it's perennially in the top 4 markets.
Yep.
But the Valley is, growing very fast. Building a company here has been tremendous for you guys.
Yep.
What's it like here today in 2013?
Yeah. So a lot of the kind of stereotypes people talk about in the Boston area are founded in some amount of fact and reality, which is, we have had a disposition against consumer startups, against kind of riskier things, because the kind of legacy and the history of the Boston area tech scene has been hardware, big enterprise software, this is, startups are like a generational kind of thing. So it takes time to kind of build. People have done consumer startups, and then they go off and fund things, and the VCs know that.
Right. If they've made their money in a consumer business, they will invest in consumer. But here you don't see too much consumer. You do see a lot of enterprise.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've been in Boston now 12, 13 years. The last 2 years, there's been this kind of weird, I don't know what happened actually. I can't trace it back to any particular moment, but the consumer scene has really started to pick up. Like there's earlier stage investing. A lot of the local VCs are now doing smaller deals in consumer startups that like 5 years ago would have been impossible unless you actually knew someone really well. You weren't going to get a consumer startup funded that easily here in Boston, not like you would on the West Coast. But it's changing. That particular end of the market is becoming much more vibrant.
People made so much money off of their enterprise startups, they want to go blow it on consumer.
Could be.
Consumer is much harder, isn't it?
Consumer is it's so much riskier, right? It's so much riskier.
I mean, with HubSpot, you knew there was a market.
Yep.
So the only question was, how much were you going to get?
That's interesting. So in HubSpot, since we started this, and the reason we started in the small business space, the reason my co-founder and I came together, this is before we were even a marketing software company, the conversations we were having in class were, we had both done enterprise software before, hated it.
What was so loathsome about enterprise previously?
A couple of things. One is...
Because I've heard that many times.
Yeah, and it's particularly bad now. So back in the 90s, it wasn't so bad, but it's it's revenue concentration. So you have a few number of customers that are writing you really big checks, which then impacts your product roadmap, because okay, if they're writing a big enough check, you do what they ask you to do. You can't not do that. Number one.
So Blue Cross and Blue Shield now bought 25,000 seats. Guess what? You're the IT department for Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Exactly. Or the product roadmap. It's like, I know you guys want to build that feature. That's in your long-term vision or whatever, but we really want this, right? And you can't. It's hard to say no, especially as a startup. So that's one. The other one is and people don't realize this, but the feedback loop and the shortness of it has such a high impact on just your overall success and happiness. Like if it takes you 12 months to like get a release out into a customer's hands, that's painful. That's no fun. Like the best thing about SaaS, in my mind, is that you can get some software out there and you can watch and see whether people are actually using it. So back when I was doing enterprise software, like we would have a new release and we had no idea whether like did 10% of our customers install the upgrade or 0% or 50, like we just didn't know, and it's hard. So there's a bunch of things, but and the sales cycles are so long. It's just not fun.
Right.
I just like the quick action. And so we talked about our collective or shared despise for enterprise software, but then we thought about consumer software, and we're like, that's just not us. I mean, it's like, and the reason it was consumer tech companies tend to be very what we call kind of binary outcomes. Either it's like super successful and
Instagram, Facebook,
exactly,
Twitter.
those kinds of things, or it's nothing at all. There's very little shades of gray in between, generally.
Right.
This is simplification, but that's generally true.
It's generally true.
It's like a lottery ticket, kind of like, okay, if it works, great.
Well, it absolutely delights the customers, in which case they tell all their friends about it, or they don't. Whereas in enterprise software, you sell a couple of individuals on corporations on it, and now you're in business.
And this is why we got into the small. So we decided on the small business as a customer before we decided on marketing as the actual.
Oh,
thing.
really? You said small businesses, so you could have been in the small business backup space.
Something else, exactly.
Or small business
the reason
accounting
we liked
space.
Small business was it had the appeal of enterprise software, which is you could kind of charge money, like make money the old-fashioned way, solve a problem, take money. But it had the overall kind of wide reach of consumer, right? Because there were millions of these businesses to sell to, so it was like the best of both worlds to us. So you could have built a real business. There were shades of gray. We could watch the business grow. We could grow it pragmatically. But then there was no ceiling on our growth. We didn't have all the downsides of enterprise software.
We're in a very bottom-up enterprise world, not top-down anymore. Has your product started to infect, if you will, the large multinational corporations? And how does somebody charging just $3,000 a month, interface with IBM or, Blue Cross Blue Shield if they were to adopt the product? Because they want $30,000 in support a month.
Totally.
They don't want a $3,000 product. They want $1 million a month product.
Yeah. And this is and we have a series of good, healthy, animated debates at HubSpot, long running. And one of them has, for the longest time, and it's still true today. So we started in the small business sector, and one of our theses, of the theses we have, one of them is that we think the winners in the software category are going to be the ones that kind of start lower end and then move up. Because we have this thesis that in software, you have this reverse gravity kind of thing. The market always pulls you up, always pulls you towards more complexity, more revenue per customer, and that you have to actually resist it. Otherwise, naturally, you're going to get pulled up. And so we've been actively resisting it, right? And we resist it through product roadmaps. We don't have a lot of the features that the large multinationals would ask. We don't want to do that. And we know that eventually we will continue to get pulled up, and that's natural, and that's going to be. But we want to do kind of like Salesforce did, essentially, kind of get in very, very cheap, very, very low end, and then over time get pulled up. But it's a tricky balance. So we have big customers now. We'll sell big deals now, but it wasn't.
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the fact that you matched my $25,000 for the Launch Festival's first hackathon.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing that.
Oh, thank you.
It's an amazing thing. What makes you tick these days that you would do something so awesome like that? I wonder.
So a couple of things. One is, I'm a hackerpreneur myself. I write code every day.
Really?
To this day, every day. And
Wow.
if 2 days go by and I haven't written code, I get this little twitch. And if 3 days go by, I'm like, what's wrong with my life? Like, where did I take this wrong turn? It's like
No dopamine.
I love it. Exactly. It's like something's wrong with my life. And I just and some of the best entrepreneurs I know, some of the most successful investments I've had are what I think of as hackerpreneurs. They're like, and so okay, well, you're doing all the hard work of pulling together a bunch of these really, really smart people. You're going to filter them. Then one of them is going to get picked as being the one or whatever. It's like, to me, that's easy money. It's like,
right.
It's
wow.
Like,
so you're like me. You actually understand exactly how easy. Yeah, this is like
it's not a hard decision. It's like
right. We're filtering pretty well here.
Totally.
And do you know that over 100 teams already? Is like hundreds of people have signed up. So
That's awesome.
and I put it towards
awesome.
the two of us putting up those prizes now. Really inspiring people. What's the hardest thing you think today about being an entrepreneur? You've been to the show, the rodeo as it were, a couple of times. and it's certainly changed. What is the biggest change from the first company, the second company, now to the third? How have things changed in the last 20 years for starting companies for founders?
A couple of things. I think this is both good news and bad news. The good news is that there's so much literature and content and knowledge that's out there shared around venture term sheets and just about every startup topic you could imagine. There's lots of good content out there. But the downside to that is that now things that entrepreneurs could have legitimately used as excuses, like, well, I just didn't know about that or whatever, that is no longer, like, there's this entire body of stuff that you're supposed to know, because that's like the table stakes have gone up, essentially, in terms of, because the content is out there. Like, if you're not reading it, I guarantee you
don't know what a liquidation preference is.
Exactly.
You don't know,
you need to know these things.
How to do the a viral loop.
So it's just harder to stand out, right? So it's, and the other thing is, it's easier, not easy, but easier to start a company, not easier to build a company, but easier to start a company.
Right.
So just the raw competition for talent, to some degree competition for capital, although that seems to be relatively plentiful. Not the kind of seed stage capital, but that's hard. But it's the stuff that I think most problems most startups have fundamentally come down to people. They're all people issues. They're not.
Do we have the right people on the bus?
Do we even know what the right people are? Can we track them? If they're not the right people, will we know it? Will we be able to act on it? How do we scale that? How do we continue to kind of fill the bus up with the right kinds of people? And as you grow, it's harder because everybody wants to hire like scrappy entrepreneurial types, right? That's
right.
Well, we're a 450-person company now. It's like, okay, well,
yeah,
it's a different recruiting process today than
and if you
when
bring
we were 10
a scrappy
people.
person in, they might not be appreciated as much as when you were a 20-person company.
Totally. Yeah, I'll tell you an insider secret. So, I have the CTO title, but I think of like on just about every other week, the T in my CTO title stands more for talent than it does for technology. That seems like I'm passionate about just raw recruiting and pulling people in. But the secret, I think, to kind of recruiting at scale is you have to. You're competing with them doing their own startup because it's so much easier right now. It's like lots of the times, like the great tech people that I want to hire, like they could just go off and do their own thing.
Sure.
And so the secret for us has been essentially offer them. It's like, okay, if you have a great idea, awesome. I'm happy to consider investing in it or whatever. But if you're like kind of there, like this is like a startup MBA. Like we don't expect you to stay here for 5 years. We'd love if you did.
Put in
but
your
it's our
2-3
responsibility.
years.
So we will expose you to. We have the transparency thing. It's like you can walk into the marketing meeting. So we have all these things that. So we want to build entrepreneurs, not just build a company. And that is not just a great marketing slogan, but it actually works, and it's true.
Hey, you're an angel investor in almost 40 companies, so when it'll be 40 when you do when the lunch festival happens, when they leave, you'll be their first angel investment potentially.
Yeah.
Has that happened yet?
It's already happened, yeah. About 3-4 times, yeah. There's a
happened to
company.
me twice already, yeah. It's one of those wonderful things. Yeah. Well, listen, this has been an amazing episode. I think we're going to get a lot out of it. Everybody go check out HubSpot.com. And Dharmesh, what is your Twitter handle? I usually write it down here.
At Dharmesh.
At Dharmesh.
D-H-A-R-M-A.
Wow. So you're old school. There's a lot of people in India right now who are pretty bummed they don't have at Dharmesh.
That's true.
It's a popular name.
Popular enough. But,
I have at Jason. So you're part of the first name club.
Yeah, that's actually more impressive.
At Ryan, at Veronica, at Brooke. I know a lot of the first name people. It's a good cohort that you're in. So everybody follow at Dharmesh, and everybody check out HubSpot. If you're a small business, honestly, and you're not using it, you're going to get your ass kicked by somebody who is. You really don't have much of a choice at this point. That's sort of what happens now. It's an arms race, isn't it? Like if a small business uses your product or MailChimp or one of these solutions and the other person's not using it, they're just going to get their butt kicked by the person across the street.
Yeah, whether it's HubSpot or not, they should be doing more inbound marketing. I mean, that's
well, that's a gracious way of saying it, but I'll say it pretty clearly. If you're not using HubSpot and you're a small business, you're crazy and you're going to get your butt kicked. So get in there and check it out. It's super affordable and awesome to use, and the people I know who've used it have had an amazing outcome. Dharmesh, thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.
My pleasure.